Welcome to the Kawarthas Small Business Podcast, where we believe the Kawarthas can be the most thriving region in Canada for small business. I'm Brian Rump from Profit Coach,
And I'm Matt Garrity from Matty G Digital.
and we are recording from the Thrive Podcast Studio at Thrive Co-working Community at 18 Kent Street West in downtown Lindsay. And today we are talking about the anniversary of this very podcast that you are listening to, and inviting our listeners to a party that is happening Friday night, October 13th. So hopefully you're listening as soon as this one drops.
Podcast about a podcast. That's
Podcast
exactly what
about a
people want.
podcast. Well, we did have a few listeners who have already noted about the party, and I think a few have maybe registered because of it. So you can register for it from the Thrive Co-working Community events site. And it is for our listeners, our potential sponsors, community members. We've sent out invites to all of our former guests. So we are, we're trying to reach out and celebrate this podcast.
Yeah, I don't know when it hit me, but I realized it's been 3 years since we started doing this. And I think you were the one that told me some other stats about us being in the top 1% of all podcasts, whatever that means. And at least it sounds cool. Yeah. So I thought, why not celebrate? Let's do something fun.
Yeah, it is cool. It's, the top 1%. I think with anything where you're like the top 1%, it sounds really cool. It doesn't mean, there's still a lot of podcasts that are way ahead of us in terms of popularity and numbers. But the reality is, and this was a podcast person who was trying to pitch us on something and did some homework as to where we were. Most people give up after 7 episodes is the average. I believe sometimes that's intentional. Most businesses should have a limited series of podcasts that maybe you can refer people to listen to. So, it's not bad necessarily, but very few are able to go 3 years of consistently posting every week.
Yeah, I think that's the hardest part, and that's the part that I get most of a response about when people kind of realize we've done a podcast every week for the last 3 years, because it's not hard, but it's not easy.
Yeah, it's not easy, not easy at all, and to plan it to. We have, like anyone, better episodes than others, but it is a lot of work, and there's, just the exercise in posting each episode, takes some time and consistency. And like any business, consistency is hard.
Yeah.
It's really easy to come up with the idea of, I'm going to do a podcast and it's going to be awesome. But to do it every week for essentially 3 years is not easy.
Yeah, the planning part's the hardest part, I think. It's behind the scenes, us trying to figure out what the topic is going to be, where we used to do things that I thought used to come really naturally. And it was like, let's talk about this, let's talk about that. And now it's kind of like, we're not pulling teeth at all. But it is tough for me to think about, what's a topic that I want to talk about and record? Because I think we've been really strict on staying on brand in that regard, where it's meant to be a conversation. It's meant to be not relaxed, but we're not telling people how to do something. It's just a conversation that people are overhearing. And I love having guests on now. I think that's more interesting for me. So I always think that that's more interesting for people listening.
Yeah, and I think that's what we follow, what we're interested in. And when you first start, it's easy, I think, to say you have the bucket list of topics. It's like, I want to do this. And for me, it was very much like, here's all the things I want to talk about. The other podcasts or other, the business community kind of chatter is often surface level, same old stuff. When you dig in, it's people promoting their thing, or it's people talking about the things they think you want to talk about. I have a more critical eye on some of those topics, or even things like, we get a lot of feedback about me saying, you don't need a business plan. And yeah, you kind of need to do some planning, but the actual document itself, there's this myth that everyone comes up with this, 50-page plan and they wordsmith it. And I think that's a barrier that doesn't really need to happen, and it holds a lot of people back, or a lot of people don't get into business because they think, well, I don't know how to do this thing. So I wanted to have conversations like that were kind of against that or show a different perspective,
Yeah.
or are against some of those firmly held
Yeah.
ideas, and that's led us kind of all over the place.
Yeah, that's true. I like that. The thing that I want to get across to people now, beyond like what you talked about, like some counter ideas, but the business plan is one, but the fact that running your own business is a risk. It is a risk, but I want to start having the conversation that sitting and being employed by somebody else is an equal risk.
Yeah, it really is. At the end of the day, there's no safe and easy paths. You're always like up for restructuring, or businesses change. Like there's all of these things can happen. So, if you're focused on building something for yourself, you can do that.
Yeah, like Disney last year laid people off. They made a fortune in profits. WWE and UFC, they just merged. WWE just sold a new broadcasting rights, huge deals there. A bunch of layoffs just happened
Oh yeah.
in the last 2 weeks, which is outstanding. Not outstanding, but it's outrageous because those businesses make a lot more money than the businesses around Kawartha Lakes, and they're laying people off.
There's this myth. This is fun how we're talking about a podcast party, but there's this myth that profitable businesses just employ more people or keep more people. They're always trying to reduce labor costs. I had a great call with someone who's looking to be a business coach in the program I'm part of, Business Made Simple. And it was someone whose whole career has been in live sports broadcasting. And through his whole career, there's been like less and less people because technology gets better. And he predicts there's another big wave of that coming. And, the broadcast rights sell for more and more and more. But that money doesn't go to the camera guy or the producers who are, putting the words up on the screen or coming up with the things to talk about, or the stats that, the commentators talk about. All of those people make kind of less money, and there's less of them.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, if you're whatever business you're in, that stuff's always happening and it's dynamic. So, there's always room to go and do things on your own.
Yeah, for sure. Let me ask you questions now, because I'm realizing we're way off topic, which is probably my fault.
But that's okay.
We're talking about 3 years of this podcast. You started this podcast before that, though.
Yes.
So when did you start it?
Ooh, that would have been...
I don't think people know that.
Yeah, the fall of 2018. I keep meaning to look some of them up and post the records like from the archives, because we had some good episodes with some friends of the show. So there was an OG episode with Dana the Book Lady from Funland Falls. We have Mike Perry did a whole episode about what Mike Perry learned at Harvard after he went to Harvard for a professional development thing.
The top of mind stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's like a legitimate scientific thing.
Yeah. We talked about, I talked to Bob Cajun Brewing Company, and this was like, I think before they were even in their Peterborough location now. So their business, changed, talked about getting a brewery up and going. It was a classic. I wanted a podcast that dove into nuances, had no idea what I was doing. I went to the Peterborough Independent Podcasters, had a great seminar. So out of Peter Robinson in Trent, a part of Trent University Student Center in Peterborough, they have like a podcast group that did like hosting, and they had like a website and a thing you could buy into, and they taught you how to like use the editing software and how to record it, because I am not a technical guy really. So I went and did that, started up the podcast. I think I did 12 or 13 episodes. Had no idea what I was doing. And then I, again, like everyone, got off the track of posting them. It wasn't as fun for me, and I always wanted to revive it. That kind of, after meeting you, was like, hey, maybe this guy would like to revive it because it would be fun to,
Yeah.
it was always just fun having conversations. So it worked out well to kind of rebirth it. So, if I go back, I want to say 2018, it might have been early 2019 when I actually got episodes. I think it might have been 18, actually.
You just got bored of it.
Yeah, actually, it might have been 2017.
Oh,
Now
wow.
that I start doing the math a little bit more. Bored. Again, it's more fun with guests, finding places to record.
Right.
It was at the time harder to do things with like Zoom.
Right.
So the programs that we use now, like all kind of sprung up after that. Before, like I remember doing another one with my friend, and we'd have to each record it on our end and send upload the files, and then I would have to splice them together. And I'm just not good at.
Was that the Big Business podcast?
Yeah, that was that was the response to this one. That was just the Nick and B podcast, which was the thing that we did for fun. But yeah, it was just a good. Been a good learning process. I think the show's evolved as well. So again, there was a big list of things I wanted to talk about. Kind of was, against certain just language or tone that I see. Now, I feel like we reinvent this podcast kind of every quarter or every time we kind of redo what our focus is. I don't really recommend anyone go back and listen to them all, although we have a few listeners who have done that. I think it'd be an interesting study in how some of our opinions might have changed over time. But I just want it to be like that good conversation that is, especially with our guests, that stays relevant for a while. So it's not like, hey, if I missed it this week, it won't be relevant. But every business changes. So, and even during our podcast, people learn things that makes their business change. So, to me, that's the magic, where it's kind of relevant, but also not relevant what people say in any given episode.
Oh, yeah. I think every 50 episodes, our direction changes. And I wonder if that actually comes through to other people, if we're the only ones that even notice that.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be interesting to ask. Tell us what you think. Because I do think it's fun. But it's also it's nice to have the party to celebrate it. This is a thing we do for fun. It is marketing for both of us, not in a way where we don't directly make money from it. It's hard to track, but we have had several people reach out who have somehow found this podcast, and then they come to something. Some we've ended up working with, some we don't. But it's a good way to see, like, do these guys know what they're talking about? Or do we want to work with them? It's kind of that basic question of like, does this sound like someone I want to actually work with? I think both of us are relationship people in terms of how we carry on business. So you want to work with people that you can understand, that you get along with. And this is a great free way to test that.
It is a good way. And now I do think the hardest part of this podcast is being authentic. And I laugh at authenticity.
Yeah, we did a whole episode about that.
In marketing, I don't think it's a real thing. And I'm happy to have that conversation with people. But to me, the hardest part is staying on brand, which to me is trying to be casual.
Yeah.
Trying not to be selly, trying not to be preachy. I think it would be easy to take this podcast with what we're doing and think of it as a way to promote ourselves, which we are, but we're not in a way of like promoting ourselves, like patting ourselves on the back.
Yeah.
This is how you do it. You have to follow this. This is the most true to myself that I am. Is the podcast and when I talk to clients or accounts now. It took me years to get to that point, talking to clients and accounts that way. Or now this is just me. And I think Kawarthas is the reason why. Because I ran into someone I work with at lunch today, Mr. Sub. And I'm like, oh, see you tomorrow morning. Like, we got a big presentation for you tomorrow morning. And just, you see someone every time you're out. And like, I don't like faking it. I'm not getting all super fancy dressed up because I'm going to run into you and Mr. Sub randomly, right? Like, and I think that's been not a challenge, but like, it's hard to just keep this conversational, which is the brand, right?
Yeah, and I think that is the reason why we think, the Kawarthas can be profitable. And it is about being yourself, whatever that means. I like this because it's a better way for people to get to know us. Because in reality, we can use some marketing stats or terms, but it does take people many interactions before they trust you and want to do business with you. And that makes it hard to market. So for me, I'm a business coach. I resented the term coach for a lot of years. I don't like necessarily being like, oh, I'm a business coach, because everyone immediately goes to like hustle bro coach, who's going to make you follow their program and do their thing and be your drill sergeant and all of these things. And I don't know that there's an easy way to overcome that in like a social media way, because it doesn't get attention. But if I can get someone to listen to the podcast, they might realize, oh, that guy isn't those things.
Yeah.
He's something else. Or, Matt will say things as they are versus, using the typical marketing jargon.
I think direct is the word people have given me, and I have come to terms with, and I would gladly accept that. I'm not being paid to not be true and honest, and I have no interest in taking people's money until they figure out something's fishy. Like, I want to tell them right up front if something's fishy or it doesn't make sense. So
yeah, I think I referred to you as short in a presentation, and then everyone was like, was he making a short joke? And I think most of those people listen to the podcast. So again, they were like, it was out of character for me to be like ripping on you for like your height or something, which is a good reason to like, you get to know that, and then you kind of know what to expect and when to, question some things.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the other cool thing about having conversations is also knowing that business is a conversation. There's no exact right way to do stuff. One of the things I love about marketing is no matter how much you study, no matter how good you do, you still have to try it and do it, and you don't know if it will work.
Yeah.
I listen to a lot of behavioral economic stuff, a lot of marketing science type things. And even if you apply those principles, you can't apply all of them. And just because you use it doesn't mean it's actually going to work. Business coaching is like that too. If I knew the exact right way to run a profitable business, I would just do it myself and not tell anyone those secrets. But there's so many variables in what you do, how it's different, what people need, how you communicate that to them. Like, there's no foolproof formula. So in both of our businesses, we're kind of, in a way, educated guessing all the time, or we're applying frameworks, or we're using best practices. Or with your experience, and I've heard this happen with you, it's like, oh, this thing isn't working. What's wrong? Now I know where to look and how to fix it, or how to do different things. And that's hard, again, to just get across in a sales pitch.
Well, sure. Those are the best people to work with. When something doesn't work exactly how we wanted it, or maybe it just fell flat, when they understand that, like, well, okay, like, fix it.
Yeah.
Or like, you give me the time to fix it. It's the people that are like, that fire you right away. Where you're,
yeah, it's like, this wasn't the miracle I wanted, and they cut it off. And that's again, that's why we need to learn these things, because we don't run businesses by like press releases. Um, we some people are motivated to talk about small business in a certain way. I think small businesses are part of any community kind of forever. And like there's some big structures that come and go, and we'll get big consolidations, but like markets, things always change over time. And when it comes down to it, I'm in a business, you want to deal with your local person or somebody who has some kind of connection to you. And often that's geographic. If my furnace breaks, I don't really want to call the one call center that services all of Canada.
Yeah.
And then they send someone who lives who knows where, and maybe they're driving hours that day. Like, you want the person who cares as much about your community as you do kind of showing up at your house. And we need to be able to talk about things like that.
I never even really thought about it in this way. It's true. Like, it just gives an insight of what we're like and what it's like to work with me. So that's good.
Yeah, you're focusing on, like, I think for you, it's like you're helping people get found who are the guide in their area for their thing. And Google and, the game of getting found in that and making it easy to be found is something that you need an expert to do for you. Like, there's a lot of great businesses that no one knows about, or they just can't find them, or they can't reach the people that just want to know who they are. And at a simple level, you're making those connections.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's like you're juggling in a circus. It's like you're on a unicycle juggling where there's all this stuff going on around you to try to keep the attention.
Yeah, I thought about it this morning that I would love if you just went to a search engine, searched for what you needed, and you actually got every business there in front of you.
Yeah.
And someone said, like how Google used to be. I don't even remember it being that way. Now you look at Google, there's so much going on. There's ads, there's maps, there's directories in the listings, there's the actual businesses that you look for.
Yeah.
And those are just the ones that are getting found. There's businesses out there, and this is frustrating as a consumer. There's businesses out there that you're not even seeing on there, which is frustrating. So,
I had this is like a magical question where I think this is where there will always be a need for some kind of marketing, or things like, everyone gets worried about AI. It's like, but humans will learn to spot that. So you Google something, you can tell what's a directory versus what's a website that's going to prove to someone that they're the person you want to do business with. But I had a student say, was talking to their place of work, and I was like, for where we are and what we offer, we should be busier.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, that's a perfect, endless problem of like, okay, how do we solve that? How do we get busier? What are the tools available to us? Just going through that process. And you always, who do you want to help you with that? Do you want the guy who lives in where you are, or do you want a nameless person on AI being like, oh, I know how to do that? Like, have you tried having these buzzwords on your website? But that might not be what you need.
I remembered a conversation I had with a guy a couple months ago, and just what an idiot he was. It wasn't actually in this area. I won't name him, but he, at the end of the SEO conversation, he's like, well, what would be the difference between hiring you for that price or just going to the college and finding someone that would do it and that they're teaching there? And then, like, at the time, I was like, well, I had like all these answers, and now, like, just think what an idiot.
Yeah.
like an actual stupid question. Anyways.
Well, and that's as someone who works at a college, there's not just this well of kids who will fix everything for free for you, and they're not necessarily learning that specifically either. And so much just goes into that. And this is again, our party's coming up. We're celebrating conversations like this and kind of where it goes. And recently I heard podcasts are popular because people want to hear. It's like going to a pub and listening in on what's going on at the next table.
Yeah.
We don't want to go to big events anymore and dress up and hear prepared remarks where you just know what they're going to say. Every government person has the same small business speech. If you look at it, it's like, hey, small businesses are the backbone of our community. And this, and this, those things aren't false, but we've heard it over and over, right? We want to dig into these types of things as a business owner. You also don't want to just be told what to do from someone who's selling that thing, or things like, hey, here's 5 tips on you should use social media. Most people know that, but they don't necessarily know how they effectively use it for their business, or why it might make sense for them over something else. Like, we want to be able to have those conversations.
Yeah, and actually be a part of those and listen into those, which I think is maybe the success of the podcast, its biggest success. Beyond the consistency, the ability, or the way that we've been able to make it seem like a conversation. And it has been. I think it helps that I don't prepare.
Yeah, and I mildly prepare. I have a few things that I want to steer us towards and talk about. So if you're still hanging in on this, good for you. Thank you. Podcast party, the 13th, 7:00 at night. You can register on the Thrive events website. I'll put a link in the show notes as well. We're excited for what's coming up. For the podcast, there's always endless ideas for topics or ways to grow. But at the end of the day, we're focusing on just that organic growth, authenticity of being who we are, making it a conversation, and not trying to sort of push any one agenda or any one thing too much.
If we did, it would be probably the corrupt, liberal, left-wing agenda.
Yeah, that would be the one, although I don't know that they can get it together enough to tell us what we're supposed to talk about, aside from their top 3 talking points. But, yeah.
Friday, October 13th, Thrive Co-working Community, 18 Kent Street West. Come hang out. Someone today asked, they said, we don't want to promote this, do we? It's exclusive. I'm like, no, anyone can come.
Yeah.
Anyone can show up. We've got guests from the podcast that will be there. We've got friends. If you want to pop in, that's awesome. Have some food, hang out, meet us. I'll sign a copy of The Advocate for you.
Yeah, that's really awesome.
And,
I forgot I was in that too. I never actually read your profile, and I had a shout out.
I just saw that today. Someone sent it over to me.
You didn't even read it right away? You just saw
the Business Advocate one?
No, your profile talked about the podcast and me.
Yes.
I was like, I didn't know my name was in this profile of you.
They did not interview me, but they had to call and get some details, and I gave them a bunch of stuff. And I will say I was adamant about including you as the co-host of it. I was like, it's not my podcast. I have to be clear, this. I am the co-host. So I was glad your name got it there.
Oh, that's okay. I wouldn't be offended if you just claimed it. I know you don't prepare. Our loyal listeners also know that.
I added that. I had a couple other things that I gave them, but they didn't really fit within the business realm, so they dropped that. I wanted to make sure. I want to tell people about 100 Men. I want to tell them about autism support, all this stuff, but that didn't make it. So
no, the podcast is good. We're excited. We're having a party for us. To be honest, the biggest thing I want to celebrate is just it's really hard to consistently do something for 3 years, and I heard a great question to ask someone is to ask them what's something you're proud of but you don't get to talk about very much. It's just a good question. And to me, this might be the thing where knowing, how close we've come a few times or just how challenging it can be, it would be easy to be like, hey, we're skipping a week, or just there's lots of things that come up, and I'm just really proud of the consistency that we've been able to put into this, and that we're, the well isn't going dry anytime soon.
No. And if it does, what we're going to do, I thought of during recording, is we're going to do from the archives, and we're going to pull an old podcast to fill it with you.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
I never thought about it until right now.
Yeah, lots of places do that. They're like, please enjoy this one that we've already done before.
Yeah.
Which I think in some ways wish we did more, because I think we get new listeners all the time. And for those who don't dive into the past episodes, like we've had some pretty cool guests
Yeah.
on here. And I know I always kind of forget about, by the time it comes out even, I forget the conversation.
Oh yeah.
But there's many times, especially this past summer episodes that aired, like we had a good run of like really good conversations with some really cool guests.
Yeah.
And that's like my favorite part of doing this.
Yeah, because the summer before we did nonsense, and then this summer we had really good podcasts.
Yeah, they're
with
so
guests.
good. Like every week, I'm like, man, if you had to pick something to go back, it's like, find those guest ones from this summer.
Yeah, 2022 on.
Yeah,
like summer ones on. Yeah.
Yeah. The best episode is the next episode. All right, so check out the podcast. If you'd like to be on the show, we're actively looking for guests. We'd love to coach you on the show. Please reach out to us. I'd love to work with you as well. You can do that at set it up at kawarthasmallbusinesspodcast.ca.